All right. I think we got some latency, but otherwise, I think we are finally live. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I think we're good to go. Just asking the guys in chat here. So welcome everyone. For those who don't already know me, my name is Nick Marro. You could find me on Twitter at Nick Marro DFS. I'm here today to help you break down tonight's MLB DFS slate on both DraftKings and FanDuel. For those of you familiar with me, you probably know me more for NBA. MLB is actually my first sport though, so very excited for the season. We've already had a lot of winners in the Discord. If you haven't already, please like the video. Also, subscribe to the channel. That helps us get more free content like this out to you on a regular basis. I'm going to stay on for the next half hour or so, mostly answering questions if you have them. Just talking through some of the games here and letting you know which plays we're on. So right now on my screen, we've got the daily plug open right here, which is one of the premium features of our site. Uh, we have a window open with the pitchers in the model as well as the stacks. So yeah, I mean most of the lineups are up right now. The one beauty of MLB is that we really don't have to wait for news to break throughout the day. What you kind of expect is what you tend to get by the time the slates come around and lock. I'm not really going to go too deep into the game by game. I'll talk quickly through each game. Um, but yeah, I mean, as we get questions, I think this show will kind of take shape and format as we go. So no real outline here or anything. So feel free to get your questions in. Really excited to break things down and just help you guys win more money. So let's get into it. So we get 11 games tonight, which means there are 22 pitchers on this slate. That's a lot of pitchers, but for me personally, I'm really only interested in like 5 or 6 of them. That's on both sites. I play both sites. I play more on FanDuel, but I also like to throw a few lineups in over in single entries on DK as well, just to kind of get a feel for both slates as we are providing content for both. But yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I'm really on Framber Valdez today. That really shouldn't come as any surprise. The Detroit Tigers have been making everyone look amazing, and he's a little bit cheaper than some of the other top options. We see him sub 10K on both sides, where we have Bieber, Scherzer, Castillo. Castillo's sub 10K on DK as well, but all these guys are over 10K on FanDuel. You're paying up to 11K for Bieber over on FanDuel. Obviously, a great matchup with Oakland, but he doesn't really have the K metrics that we see with Framber. So um, I really like Framber here. Love him against Detroit. He's probably my favorite pitcher on the slate. If you can afford Scherzer, Bieber, I think they're excellent as well. For me in cash games, I know we don't have too many cash players in here probably, but I'd probably go Framber and Scherzer over on ZK as far as cash SPs go. There's plenty of great value bats, and obviously you're going to be stacking in most of your lineups. But the good thing about having so many games on the slate is we're able to find a ton of these punts at the low end to kind of fill things out as your one-offs to make it easy to fit stud pitchers. So in small field, like low risk contest, pitching comes first, and I'll be paying up for Bieber, I'll be paying up for Scherzer, Valdez, and then Castillo, Urias, and Heaney rather, are also interesting to me in tournaments. We get a little bit of a discount on Andrew Heaney. This guy is the Jekyll and Hyde of the MLB. Obviously, a very high ceiling, excellent K metrics. We sort by Ks per inning pitch here. I think he's at the top, 1.33, tied with Scherzer. So just tells you the kind of ceiling he has. But he's in kind of a tricky matchup against an underrated Baltimore offense. And he's also very volatile. We see him give up home runs at times. Not seeing the huge money line favorite on him that we're seeing on someone like Valdez, who's almost a minus 300, or Urias is 265. So you're in a tricky spot here with Heaney, but at the discount with the upside, he's an excellent tournament play. But in that same breath, I mean, we're seeing pretty heavy ownership on him. 12% on FanDuel, certainly pretty appealing. DK, when you look at the ownership, you got to keep in mind we're playing 2 pitchers there, so most of these ownership figures will double what we're seeing on FanDuel. So no major discrepancy as far as that goes. If we are looking at ownership on some of the pitching here, like I said, Valdez is my favorite, but I think the field kind of agrees with me on that. Castillo getting a little bit more ownership than we're seeing on Scherzer. Personally, I'd rather get to Scherzer, but you're paying 1,300 more, so no real surprise there. Bieber looks great. Heaney, we just talked about looks good. And then really, I mean, the one player who's not drawing much ownership I'm interested in is Julio Urias. Obviously, we're dealing with Dave Robertson and his short leash for starting pitchers. But against the Rockies, away from Coors, that's an upside play I like a lot. So in large field contests, I'd certainly recommend mixing in some Julio Urias. But for a slate where we have 22 pitchers to choose from, there's really only a handful I have any sort of interest in. Um, but yeah, let's talk through some of the stack options now. And for those who are new to MLB, unlike other sports, um, the stack comes before the individual batter. So if you like an individual batter, that's great, but you kind of want to cast a large net over upside, if that makes sense. So you're going to look for teams with high implied totals, which is going to lead you onto stacks before it's going to lead you onto individual plays. Um, Going to pull up our stacks model here. I know we wrote up a few. I mean, we get the highest implied run totals here. So this is where most people look first. So if this is what Vegas is saying is the most likely run scored for all these teams, obviously Toronto Blue Jays over six, almost 6.5 runs. That's ridiculous against Chris Bubik. St. Louis Cardinals pushing 6 runs. Tampa Bay Rays against Chad Kuhl look good, 5.43 here. Houston against Matt Manning. I actually think that's a little bit high. Manning's a decent pitcher. And then we got the Dodgers over 5 runs against Marquez, the Red Sox against Rosny Contreras, and then the Yankees against Matt Strom and the rest of that Philadelphia bullpen. So usually, if you're trying to figure out the popular stacks, the first thing you can do is kind of just look at the high totals. We also have the total movements here. St. Louis has climbed throughout the day, which is no surprise to me. That lineup is really built to dominate left-handed pitching. And tonight, yeah, they're facing a kid. I think his name's Dylan Dodd, lefty for the Braves, who's probably only in the rotation because they're kind of banged up right now. A decent prospect, but really not someone we have to fear. Pretty mediocre K metrics and everything like that. So no surprise that we've seen this total climb throughout the day. Whenever I could get the Cardinals against the mediocre lefty, I'm going to do it. First and foremost, we got to look at Arenado and Goldschmidt, both ridiculous ISOs against um, left-handed pitching. And I think if I pull up batters, we have ISO here in the model, so we could just kind of sort them that way. But also, they added Wilson Contreras with Yadi Molina retiring. Contreras is now the starting catcher, and he also has a 300 ISO against left-handed pitching. If you're looking for ISO and you're kind of new to MLB, anything over 200 against the handedness of the pitcher you're facing is usually strong. So when we're saying these guys have 300s, that's just outstanding. Like really, really good power metrics here. And yeah, so we're seeing a 323. We kind of have to scroll. I get a small monitor here to fit this all on one screen. But look at the top. We got Goldie, Arenado, Contreras, all massive ISOs, 323, 305. I guess we're only showing a 257 for Contreras. I think that number is higher if you just focus on his numbers from the last season. I think our stats go back a little bit further. That's probably why it's a little bit lower. But I mean, 257 is still ridiculous. Taylor Motter, if you're trying to fit this stack, I did not expect him to be in the lineup today. I know I'm going to go back and adjust some builds. We're getting him at 2K flat on both sites, which is minimum price. You could play him in the outfield over on FanDuel or that utility spot. You could play him at first base or outfield. But if I'm stacking Cardinals, I'm probably getting Goldschmidt in there first, so I'd probably use him in the outfield. But we're seeing very good power metrics from Motter here against lefties as well, so he's going to be appealing. Tyler O'Neill, tougher to fit if you're paying up for Arenado, Goldschmidt, Contreras, etc. But I love the Cardinals here. I think they're going to look really strong. And let's see if we pull up the ownership for the stacks. I know they're popular, but they're really not as popular as, say, Tampa or Toronto. So they're still pretty chalky, but I think more people are getting to the Rays because they're cheap, and Toronto just because it's a ridiculously good spot against Bubich. So the Cardinals are probably my favorite stack on the slate, all things considered. In terms of OF index, they're number one team on the board. ISO rating, number one team. WOBA rating, number one team, and then team total, they're third. But obviously, this is just a great spot. We saw that total climb throughout the day. Clicking over, seeing if we have any questions now. How would I recommend treating high owned stacks and GPPs like the 555 on DK or 150? Yeah, so a lot of those tickets are getting cashed today, so that's a really good question. So yeah, these are the types of stacks I look to in those tournaments, honestly. Like, it's interesting. Like, we always hear about preaching don't play chalk, don't play chalk, but as you get into those higher dollar, smaller field tournaments, you see a lot of the chalk does concentrate. So like teams that are ranking like third, fourth, fifth in ownership, those are the types of stacks I'm usually trying to hone in on. There's going to be some Blue Jay stacks in there on FanDuel where you're playing two stacks. If you're going with one of these chalkier options, I think you want to kind of dip down and mix it with either a lower owned pitcher or a lower owned stack. Like say there's three variables to what you're building on FanDuel. You have one pitcher, you have two stacks. It's similar on DK, but a little bit different. You have two pitchers in one five-man stack. So you want at least one of those variables to be relatively low owned. In higher dollar, smaller field stuff, I'm comfortable going chalky with two of the three variables, if that makes sense. So for example, say you're going chalk at pitcher tonight. You're going to have Valdez, you're going to have Scherzer or Castillo, something like that. Um, then maybe on DK you don't want to go with one of the top three or four stacks. You want to go maybe four, five, six range, get a little bit more contrarian that way. Or if you want to play something like Toronto, I don't think you want to go with two chalk pitchers. You're probably going to want to go Toronto, and then maybe look at someone like Valdez, and then you might have to get a little creative with someone like maybe Julio Urias, who has a lot of upside but pretty low ownership. And then on FanDuel, it's similar. It's just you're dealing with two stacks and one pitcher instead of two pitchers and one stack. Um, but yeah, as you get into larger field stuff, like the super big fields where you're dealing with 40, 50,000 lineups, I try to have two of those variables be lower owned. And I mean, when I say lower owned, it's all relative to the size of the slate. Where we have 11 games here, I'd say like the top 4 or 5 stacks are all higher owned. So if you can get to an Atlanta, Houston, Pittsburgh, even like the Yankees, they're not drawing much ownership on either site. I think they're a pretty good contrarian option here against Strom. Obviously, a lot of power against left-handed pitching. They'd be a good option, and then you could go chalky a pitcher, and you're probably different enough that way. The other thing on DK, we always recommend usually going with the five-man stack first. There are some decent punts if you're not stacking the Cardinals. I know Jordan Walker, who's a Rookie of the Year candidate, it's like 2,400 or something today. I like him as a one-off. He'll probably be popular. But yeah, just make sure you're not using very chalky players with those one-offs if you are going chalky with some of your other variables. That's the way I kind of go about it. But at the same time, I mean, the higher dollar you go, like the 150 on FanDuel, I know that's a decent sized contest. I think I had it up. Or no, that's the slam. But yeah, I mean, depending on the size of the contest, it's surprising. Like a lot of the pros are playing chalk in a lot of those spots. It's just you have to kind of pick where to get different from it. And in MLB, a sport where even the best hitters are only getting on base 4 times out of 10, there's certainly merit to getting away from the more popular options. So for me, I'm trying to get one of those three variables to be very contrarian if I'm very chalky on the other two. But if you could find a nice balance of everything, kind of like, I don't know, maybe go to like, I like Houston against Manning. Personally, I think Manning's an underrated pitcher. Like, I don't want to go too far off the model, but to me, that's not a stack I'm rushing to get to. Maybe Texas against Kyle Gibson, pretty low owned. I like them in tournaments a lot today. You could go chalky a pitcher and feel pretty good about that. But what I wouldn't be doing is trying to jam Toronto with two top um, price pitchers. That's just not really going to shake out for you, or you're going to be competing against a lot of very similar lineups. I know on smaller slates where there's not many options, you can kind of go that way. And the way to kind of get different there is to mix in the bottom half of the order. I know we had Trace Thompson the other night for the Dodgers, hit 3 home runs. I think he was 16-ish% owned in large field, but that was just a 3 game slate. But players like that are the way you're going to get different. And if you find yourself a little bit chalky, it's fine to mix in the bottom of some of these batting orders. But you still have to pick your spots as far as that goes too. Like Taylor Motter today for the Cardinals, I like a lot. He's batting ninth, like I said before, min price both sites. You can mix him in. I would be prioritizing Arenado, Goldschmidt, but if you want to go like Motter, Goldie, Arenado, then maybe Edman or Carlson just to kind of get enough correlation in that wraparound. I think that makes sense. You could go Contreras, Goldie, Walker, Motter, like every other player in the bottom half of that order. I think that would be pretty contrarian on FanDuel. I think most people are trying to jam Goldie, Arenado, Contreras. So if you're leaving one of them out, obviously there's some risk if that guy you leave out goes off. But that's how you're going to get different if you're competing against other lineups. So in a field of a lot of high dollar players, and this kind of applies to any contest really, And the way you're building, you're competing against similar lineups. So, like, if you have a Scherzer team, you're competing against the other Scherzer teams first. Not only does Scherzer have to outperform the other pitchers, but if Scherzer does really well, then you're competing against those Scherzer teams to get to the top of the leaderboard. That's why it's pretty easy to min cash if you just like take the best plays, play the best chalk, but it's going to be very, very difficult to climb up a leaderboard. I know one of my biggest hits, I think it was like 10K in a I think 777 a year back or two. It was one of the first days of the year. Yovaldi was popular. I played Mariners bats against them, completely unowned, and they got to him. They went off, and that was the reason I climbed the leaderboard. It wasn't because I had another good stack that was popular, like the Blue Jays or something, who everyone had. Everyone had another popular pitcher. I had the chalk pitcher as well, but the Mariners are the reason I climbed that leaderboard. So not only does your chalk need to go off, but to get to that next level, like you need the good chalk to get to that point where you're cashing sometimes, but to get to the next part of that leaderboard, you're going to have something lower owned to help you climb. But I will say in the higher dollar, smaller field stuff, you'd be a bit surprised with how chalky some of the better plays are. Like a lot of the pros do kind of lean into chalk first, and then they'll look to get different with that third variable. I find that to be a pretty common um, way to go about building. So let's see what else we can go through here. I know I spent a lot of time on the Cardinals. I do really like them a lot tonight. The Red Sox are going to be popular. They've been really hot. I live right outside of Boston. It's gorgeous today, around 50 degrees. A little bit of wind blowing in, but we're looking at like 70, 80% humidity. So great hitting weather here once again. And I know a lot of people like to look into weather, wind, and everything like that, but most parks it's not a super major factor. It's just this time of year you gotta have to compare the weather relative to the other games you have on a slate. So like the other night, every game was cold, but the Rockies, or not the Rockies, the Brewers were playing indoors, or the Astros were playing indoors. So obviously those are better hitting conditions in these games where teams are playing and it's 30, 40 degrees out. So you take a look at the slate as a whole. I mean, it's 81 degrees in Kansas City today, which isn't surprising considering Toronto is one of the most popular teams on the slate. But as we get later in the year, it's going to be 80 degrees everywhere. So like the wind's going to matter less, the weather's going to matter less. You just kind of look for outliers. But yeah, really good weather across the league today. Again, so many options to choose from. That's why I do encourage you maybe to go with two lesser owned variables out of three if you are building that way in larger field stuff. I play a lot of single entry personally. I'm eating a lot of chocolate pitcher tonight. Like I said, there's only 4 or 5 arms I have really any interest in. Um, but yeah, I'll just kind of do a kind of dummy build on each site. Feel free to ask questions, guys. I got my eye in the chat. Um, and yeah, Surf 5 cash games are getting more and more difficult to win. You do kind of have to get a little bit different, treat them like GPPs, because yeah, on a slate like tonight, I mean, the first plays in are probably those Blue Jays bats if you can fit them. Framber Valdez is cheaper than the other studs. So if I were building a cash build, and this is hypothetical, I know right here we have the MLB squeeze open. You're going to be looking for value bats, but I don't know. Cash games are almost dead in MLB, honestly. I used to be a primary cash player and I've really gotten away from it. That's why I like single entry now because I can build, use some of the best plays, so to speak, but you're still stacking, you're still using tournament strategy because, yeah, on most nights, it's just really tough to get away from the field if you're just playing all the chalk, and that's how most people are building now. Um, but yeah, I'll build this. Say this is for like a mid-size single entry or even in a high dollar tournament. Valdez is my favorite arm on the slate. He's pretty chalky though, so I don't want to go too popular with my stacks. So we'll go over to the stack model. Looking at ownership, I mean the Yankees on FanDuel. Let's sort by ownership. And again, you're seeing numbers over 100% because you have two stacks per lineup. Personally, I like to go 4 4s on FanDuel. 4-3-1 if there's a one-off you really like, or you want to use a strong punt like someone like Motter, and you're not stacking Cardinals, that allows you to fit a more expensive 4 team and 3 team stack. So that's where I'm using one-offs. We also have the lineup builders. So if you're playing mass multi-entry, that's a whole nother video. I know we have a lot of MME guys on the site. I haven't been playing much MME. I will start to ramp that up as the season kind of progresses. But earlier in the season, I do a lot of hand building. I do a lot of single entry. So yeah, if we're going chalk at pitcher, I'm not going to want to go chalk at stack. So, well, I really like Tampa. I really like Toronto. I'm going to see if there's anywhere else we can go. Um, St. Louis, I've talked about them a ton. They're probably third ranked. If I go with them, we're going to have to find something a little bit lower owned because Valdez is very chalky. Um, can I fit Yankees with St. Louis and Valdez? Probably not. Um, Maybe Texas, who I talked about before, something like this. Let's see here. So yeah, Texas, I don't think draws as much ownership as they should here. I got a couple monitors open. I'm just trying to pull up Kyle Gibson's numbers so we know exactly which bats to target for Texas. I mean, if you just pull up the model, this is probably the easier way to do it. Pull St. Louis here, add in Texas. We can sort by ISO. And ISO's king, really, because we're chasing home runs. And this may adjust more as we're seeing ridiculous stolen base numbers right now. But for me, I'm still building on the best ISO plays per team, per slate, against the handedness of the pitcher they're facing. And Gibson's historically, I mean, he's worse against lefties, but the splits aren't that severe. We're seeing around like a 170 ISO allowed to left-handed hitters, 150 to righties. So it's really not that dramatic of a split. So you could feel good just playing guys from either side. So Simeon, Seager, Garcia, low, Garver, Jung, pretty talented rookie, probably pretty cheap. Yeah, I like him here as well. So yeah, let's build a little Texas stack here. And I know on the phone you can just pull it up and see the full lineup and go that way. It's a little annoying to do it this way, but let's see. I can pull up the lineup on my other monitor. Maybe there's a way to share two screens. We'll look into that in the future. But for now, I think this is the best way to go about this. So, all right. So at the top of the order, Marcus Simeon's been excellent. Really like him. We're getting a ton of power out of someone like Garcia, 3,900. He's expensive. So now we're on the high end of price. So we're going to have to get a little bit creative in terms of value. I think Josh Jung looks good at 2,700. I have DK prices up. Let's see. Nate Lowe, 3,400 is not bad. Mitch Garver's not terrible. Really not excited to play either of them. What else do we have in the outfield? Good old Robbie Grossman. Got to get used to seeing him as a Ranger. Bunch of years with Detroit. I don't know. I mean, personally, I'd probably want Nate Lowe or Seager. I mean, I do really like Seager here. Um, so we'll see what we can fit. So now we're left with 2,800 per player. So we're going to have to go to a value stack. The popular value stack tonight is going to be Tampa. I don't think we're going to be able to get to them. That's just too much chalk. I mean, at the same time, though, Texas is pretty low owned, so that's not the worst idea. Um, let's see. Just pulling up what else we have here. I mean, Pitt is going to get some love. I know we talked about Boston. Maybe we go with Boston. But yeah, so the reason I'm able to go to a team like Boston and they're drawing a decent amount of ownership is because we're going lower owned with something like Texas, and even then we see Boston way down the list. So, like if I'm using one of these stacks that are in the top three for FanDuel ownership, you're definitely going to want to go further down the list when you're using your second. But for something like this, I mean, we got Texas down here, so we could go to Boston and feel pretty good about it. I know Casas is cheap; he looks good there. Come on, click, click. There we go. Obviously, we'd love to get Devers. I don't think we can afford him though, so that's tricky. I mean, if Devers goes off, you're competing against other Red Sox stacks. It's not going to feel great. Um, but maybe Duvall. I don't know. We're gonna have to have like a really ugly punt here, which stinks. But yeah, there's really no one in the lineup tonight cheap that I love. But let's do this. Instead of going Simeon at second, we'll go back to Boston, who doesn't have a second baseman. Okay, so I picked the two teams that don't really work together. Um, but how about this? You know how I mentioned before, maybe you find a one-off to make things more affordable? I know he's batting ninth. Usually you don't want to use a guy batting ninth as a one-off, but Motter, who has over a 200 ISO against lefties, use him as a one-off. Then you can go up to Simeon. And then we have 3,100 for our last Red Sox bat. And I don't know if there's going to be anything here I like, but you get the idea. I mean, essentially, what you're trying to do is build. You have three variables on both sites: FanDuel, two stacks, one pitcher. DK, it's really one stack, two pitchers, and you don't want to go chalk with all three variables, especially on an 11 game slate, which is pretty easy to get away from. So, yeah, maybe Justin Turner. Something like this, pretty good tournament lineup to me. I mean, I'd love to get Devers over any of the guys we're paying up for for um, Texas. So maybe I would pull Jung, put Devers in at third, then we'd have to punt short, something like that. But pretty much you get the idea of what I'm going for there. Let me catch up on chat. I know we got a few here. Um, Totally agree with you, sir. Single entry is the way to go. Castillo looks great. I'll take a quick look at his ownership. I know he's pretty popular. We're coming up on a half hour, but I got started late. I'll go another 10, 15 minutes. If you guys have any questions, just get them over into the chat. Catching up on that now. Hey, douche. Uh, Good to see you, man. What's up? I know we're still grinding NBA. We get the video tomorrow. I think I'm doing NBA in the morning. Happy to fully transition over to MLB though over the next couple of weeks. These past couple of weeks of NBA are just absolutely brutal. Playing guys that probably shouldn't even be in the league. Um, but yeah, let's take a look at ownership. I mean, on DK again, you're playing two pitchers, so all the ownerships are going to be inflated. So yeah, Castillo looks great here against the Angels. I mean, he's got a pitch around guys like Trout and Otani. Obviously, a pretty potent lineup at the top of that order. So I'm fine getting to Castillo. I do like him here, but if you're using him, you're either going to want to get a lower owned SP2 or a lower owned stacked. For me, I keep landing on Urias just because he's not very popular. I mean, he does have that short leash with Dave Robertson there, but I mean, as far as the top arms go, I'm a little bit surprised by his ownership. There's not a lot of guys I'm taking a flyer on here. Like someone like Kikuchi, coming off an excellent spring against KC. The Royals are super popular tonight. I mean, he has upside. I can't really stomach it though. I'd rather pay down for bats, go chalky at pitcher, and get different with my stacks. I think that's where I'm kind of seeing things. Um, but all right, yeah, let's build a quick one on DK the same way I did on FanDuel. So yeah, like I said, you want two of your variables to be kind of lower owns. I mean, in smaller field stuff, you could get away with one contrarian variable of the three. And again, to reiterate, you're playing two pitchers and one stack on DK. That's a five-man stack. I highly recommend almost always going with a five-man, especially on an 11-game slate like this. It's very rare that you're not going to see a five-man stack go off. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, let's take a look at some ownership. I know I got like four windows open, but I'm clicking through them all at the same time. So, okay, so DK will go to ownership first. I love Framber. I'm gonna get him in. He's my chalk piece. And then I'll go with Urias because I keep talking about him. I think he's a little bit under-owned. We're seeing single-digit ownership on a pitcher whose upside is as good as any on the slate. So we'll go Urias, Valdez, and then let's click over to stacks. And yeah, we have the accumulative ownership for stacks on the site, which is super, super useful. Obviously, you could check the ownership on an individual bat, but again, we're building using stacks in MLB. The correlation is just impossible to really pass with one-offs unless you can somehow target 9 random guys that are going to homer on a given night. And that's how people used to play cash games, but more and more we're seeing them just kind of lean into stacking, and that's why cash games are almost dead in MLB as far as I'm concerned. So we got one low-owned pitcher, one chalky pitcher, so we could kind of go with a mid-range stack. I don't want to go with Toronto; they're expensive and they're super chalky. Tampa Bay, similar deal, over 100% ownership cumulatively speaking, so I probably won't get to them. I mean, St. Louis, I love, but maybe a little bit over-owned. But anything now we're seeing below 40% for a team, I'm interested in all of these. Maybe we go with the Yankees. I do like them against Philly. I mean, it's tricky. Strom's on a short leash tonight, probably only throwing 60 or so pitches. But the good thing about that is they are in Yankee Stadium, and the Philly bullpen really isn't all that great. So let's pull up the Yanks here. So we're prioritizing Judge, very high ISO against lefties and righties alike. Stanton also better against lefties, very high ISO. I like Donaldson, but 3,200, yeah, that's a really good price. Torres has been solid. Um, so those are probably going to be the chalkier options. And then you got to decide if you want to punt with someone like Volpe, maybe use up the catcher position for someone like Higashioka. But let's see what we have left per player before I fill in that last spot. So again, the Yankees aren't that popular. Urias is under-owned, so we can eat chalk on a pitcher like Valdez and feel pretty good about it. I still want a five-man stack the Yankees, but we only have 2,400 left per player, so I think we have to go with Higgy. I don't mind it. He did homer, I think, if it was it yesterday or the day before? Spelt his name wrong. So he has power at 2,500. So we need true punts now at first base, shortstop, and outfield. So I'll actually show you how to use the models to find players this way. So yeah, we got our lower owned stack. We got a low owned arm. We could go to DK, sort by ownership. Rather, let's sort by OF index, and then we can take the price, go down to say, I don't know, 3K. Oh, there's our boy Modder. I keep landing on him. Trying to see how owned he is. Yeah, still only 3% owned on DK. Again, I know probably don't get excited about rostering a guy that's batting ninth, but he has an over 200 ISO against a lefty. The Cardinals are a popular stack. I don't want to use him at first, though. I saw my first baseman. Um, we're going to go Casas from the Red Sox. Really like his upside here against Contreras. We go Motter as a one-off. And I mean, in a perfect world, we're going five with a two-man and a one-man. So if we can get a shortstop from the Cardinals or the Red Sox here, I'd love to at 2-9. Probably not going to happen though. So what are we left with? Terang hit a home run yesterday. Don't really want to play him against Scherzer though. Maybe Taylor Walls. And if I had more time, I'd probably mess around with this more to get a little bit better correlation. Um, but yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind Walls there. Who else is down here? I mean, Espinal. I don't know what we do with that leftover salary, but yeah, I like him in that Blue Jays stack. You get a little bit of exposure to the Blue Jays at the bottom of the order. Left with 800 per player, so maybe we get off that Motter play now, since he's batting ninth. And let's see. No Toronto, no Blue Jay. I don't know. Oh yeah, there we go. We got a nice 5-2-1. We get the bottom of the Blue Jays order here. We get Merrifield, and Espinal batting sixth and eighth. Casas is a nice one-off. Five-man Yankee stack. A low-owned Julio Urias, Framber Valdez. That's a pretty damn good lineup for probably like mid to large field tournaments, which is mostly what I'm playing. Let's see here. We got any more questions? Yeah, Cleveland. I don't mind Cleveland tonight, sir. Let's take a look at what the model's saying for them. I don't think we had them in the plug today. Um, who are they facing? I know they're facing Oakland, but JP Sears. Yeah, so Sears is interesting because the thing about him, um, he came over in the Yankees trade for Montas, I think, and he was a reliever. So he's on a short leash. Um, let's see. I'll use my other screen to pull up his spring training game log. But the reason I'm talking through this, um, when you're dealing with kind of a bullpen game, that kind of limits your upside at times. Like obviously the Oakland bullpen isn't great, but when they can pick and choose matchups against Cleveland, then they can kind of throw lefties out against the lefties, righties out against the righties, try to get guys in there who aren't going to get crushed by Jose Ramirez if they can help it. So if Sears is in for 5 or 6 innings, I agree it's a great spot. Pretty mediocre arm. But I do think it's more likely than not that this turns into a bullpen game, which is going to give me at least some pause in stacking Cleveland. But I'm just taking a look on my other screen at his spring training numbers. I mean, he's been pitching deeper into games, went 5 innings his last two spring starts. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to get to some Cleveland today, I think they're another team you could consider. Pretty low owned, definitely not drawing much ownership compared to some of the other top options. Not the best park in Oakland. And it's colder there today. I know when we were looking at weather earlier, they actually had one of the more adjusted percentages off weather because it's only 60 degrees in Oakland, which is actually a spot where it's usually hotter than most of the rest of the league. But we're seeing 80-degree temperatures in some of the games in the what am I saying, Midwest. Um, so yeah, I don't love the weather here. I don't love the fact that it's a big ballpark and it might turn into a bullpen game. But at the same time, I mean, the field's kind of feeling the same way, so you're getting them pretty low owns. Wind blowing out, but again, minus 10% adjustment for the weather here because it is only 60 degrees in California where it's usually much hotter. So, decent spot Cleveland. Obviously, Ramirez is going to look great at the top of that order. Rosario's been good. This is one of the teams that's been stealing a lot of bases. Guys like Jimenez, Gonzalez look good. Mike Zanino, lots of power against lefties, always helps make that stack more affordable. So I don't mind him there either. But yeah, lots to like. Checking chat one more time here. So yeah, I mean, Another fun slate tonight. 11 games to choose from. Again, if you're building, just try not to have all your variables be chalky. And I think in those larger field contests where we're playing $555 tickets on DK today, some of those $150 lineups on FanDuel, you can eat a little bit of chalk. You don't need everything to be low owns. So if you go chalky at pitcher, make sure your stacks aren't the two chalkiest stacks on the slate. But if you get different at pitcher, then you can eat some of the chalk, play some Toronto bats, play some Tampa bats, but take your risk at pitcher. So you got to take a risk or two. That's the thing. You can't play all the best plays in those contests, but you don't need to just go say, oh no, they're 20% on. I got to go lower than that. You don't have to play like the Mets and Cleveland with a pitcher that's not even 20% owned. Like you can get different, but you don't need to get completely outlandish. And if you're playing a popular stack like St. Louis, maybe someone like Motter who's batting ninth, obviously a pinch hit risk, but where we're seeing an ISO over 200 for guys at the bottom of the order at minimum price, those are the players I like to use for wraparound stacks. So once again, everyone, my name's Nick Marro. You can find me on Twitter at Nick Marro DFS. I'm contributing to the MLB plug all season. We're gonna do these videos 2 times a week, at least till the end of NBA, maybe more after that. We'll see. But definitely jump in Discord, say hi, hit me up on Twitter, hit the DMs. Always happy to talk to anyone who's interested. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're gonna get more free content like this out to you. Let's have some fun tonight, everyone. Good luck, and let's make some money. Take care.